Elmarit kohtaa viikon kuluttua torstaina vieraskentällä kivikovana Ruotsi. Päävalmentaja Anna Signöl seurasi eilen huuhtajien otteita Olympiastadionilla ja iloitsee lajin nosteesta.
Det är fantastiskt. Det är jätteroligt att det blivit ett sånt otroligt intresse. Och jag är bara glad att idrottsintresse i Finland blir större och att fotbollsintresse blir större. Det har så många fördelar att hålla på med idrott. Man lär sig så mycket saker i
No niin.
kan man säga. Så att
Hyvää iltaa. Siellä jollain on radio tai TV päällä, niin laitatte pois, niin päästään aloittamaan. Hyvää iltaa kaikille. Tervetuloa jälleen mukaan tämänkertaiseen Koutsikorneriin. Nimeni on Hanna Möttölä ja apuna toimii Jari Savolainen urhean puolelta ja sitten nimikaima Jari Toivonen Suomen valmentajat ry:n puolelta. Kaikille vieraille tiedoksi, niin mukana oli, että me nauhoitetaan tämä esitys. Nämä löytyy sitten, saatte linkin tuonne urhean sivuille. Niin jos jotain jäi laittamatta muistiin, niin sieltä pystyy jälkikäteen käydä kertaamassa. Mutta pidämättä puheitta siirrytään illan vieraaseen. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to welcome Peter Lonergan to our Coaches Corner event tonight. How are you, Peter? All right, Peter, you muted? You're mute.
Sorry.
All right,
Yes.
there we go. How are you? Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to speaking to the coaches this morning and sharing a few ideas.
Oh, great. Just a little background.
Se on hyvä, kohtuullisen tyytyväinen tilanteeseensa. Myrkkyjä siihen työnnetään.
Saako siellä mikrofonit pois päältä? Kiitos. All right. So yeah, Peter is the Basketball Australia's Director of High Performance Coach Development and Talent Identification, and it's been a really a pleasure to get to know Peter the last couple of years, and he's become a mentor to me and a great resource to get new ideas from and pick his brain. You share the game so openly, and you're a great model for all our less experienced coaches to follow. So, and you obviously have a extensive coaching background. Having been part of the Australia Opals, the women's national team, and various junior national teams, as well as the different junior competitions in Australia. So we're really looking forward to the night and hopefully us Finnish coaches and a few international coaches, we're gonna get a couple of nuggets here and there and become a better coaches. But before I let you start your presentation, can you give us kind of the outline? What's behind you have a fancy title and what are your normal days consistent of? What do you concentrate on for Basketball Australia, and what do you spend your most time on?
Yeah, it's a fancy title that has changed 3 or 4 times. It gets fancier every time, but the job doesn't change. The job's about trying to support coaches in our pathway from volunteer youth coaches right through to our national team coaches. So that consists of running a lot of courses, but also clinics. I'm in a small town in regional New South Wales right now. We did a clinic last night. And for our elite coaches, our national team coaches and our pro coaches, it's about providing them with some professional development, whether that's in leadership, where it's the technical, tactical area, player relationships, engagement. So an average day is a lot of emails and phone calls trying to connect with as many coaches as we can. And, I'm a big believer that the only way to really help and develop and support coaches is do it in 3D. So I spend a lot of time on the road, watching practices, watching games, talking to coaches, and doing as many clinics as we can.
Yeah, I know the Australian basketball does an unbelievable job with your coaching development, and obviously you're a much bigger country than we are. But can you give us just kind of the idea how many federation-led clinics you guys organize, coaching events you guys organize yearly?
Well, our aim is to do 40, but obviously the COVID world has impacted that. A lot of this now, a lot of webinar type things, but yeah, we aim to do 40 if we can, and that ranges from our elite coaches conference to workshops to clinics and courses. So yeah, that's our aim, and usually we get there because there is, a bit like Finland, there's a real thirst for knowledge and a real desire to get better. So yeah, that's the ballpark, and we just started again face-to-face delivery last night. So we're looking forward to that.
All right, well, good. Yeah, hopefully the COVID situation in Australia gets better by the week, and But all right, well, hey, I'll let you start your presentation, and for all the listeners, after Peter's finished, we have plenty of time for questions and answers, and get really to the fun part of it. All right, go ahead.
Thanks, Hannah. All right, coaches, thanks very much for taking time to spend some time with me this morning. I've got huge respect for Finnish basketball and Finland coaches. I've admired their youth teams and their senior national team for a long time. So it's a great privilege and honour for me to do this. So we're going to talk about how do we create a positive learning environment and practice. And we know now with the modern player that if they're not enjoying it and they're not seeing the value in it, it's not an engaging and dynamic environment, they're less likely to work hard, they're less likely to work on their game, and we don't get the results that we want to do. Because as coaches, particularly youth coaches, our charter is to improve the players, to develop them, and hopefully allow them to play at the next level. So we spend a lot of time on figuring out how can we create this positive learning environment. And positive doesn't mean that it's all compliments and we just spend the whole time clapping and telling the players they've done a great job. It's really about a dynamic environment where you can see that the players are getting better session in, session out, week in, week out. So, what is a positive learning environment? Well, there's a definition from two sports scientists, and it speaks to everyone feeling that they're part of the session, that it's not a hierarchy where it's the coach pushing out information and the players being obedient and the players doing as they're told without any questioning, without any engagement. And I think the big word there is rapport, where there is a trust and rapport between yourself and your students, obviously in our case, players. And that means that there needs to be two-way engagement. There needs to be conversation. We spend a lot of time with our coaches, from our Olympic coaches right down to youth coaches, talking about the importance of having more conversations. And we'll get into it here in a sec. Just in terms of probably 20 years ago, coaching was all about pushing of information. So the coach was the designated expert and they would provide all the information and the players would be compliant. And that was seen as the hierarchy, that was seen as the best way to do it. And it mirrored how we educated people in general. Well, we know now that that's not a great way to learn. That's not a great learning relationship, learning environment. So that ability to develop trust comes from developing a rapport, having conversations, and also being a bit vulnerable. You know, the days of the coach being the all-knowing guru of all things basketball and the players just nodding and going about their business are gone. That doesn't matter if it's the NBA, Eurobasket, or youth basketball. Players ask more questions. They're more inquisitive. They've got a heightened ability now to take on information and then try and unpack it through questions. So we've got to be, as coaches, ready to have that conversation, ready to have that engagement. So what is a positive practice? You know, and again, positive isn't about compliments and everything's great and it's all fun and we're all laughing, and that's not positive. That's fun, maybe, but it's not positive. Positive means that we're heading in the right direction, that we're working collaboratively to achieve our goal. And there's 5 or 6 things that you want to make sure that you do and that you're aware of anytime that you're getting ready to practice and then you're running practice. So of course, the first one is be organized. It's very hard to create any forward movement, to create any confidence, to create any rapport if you're not organized, if you don't have a practice plan, and not just a practice plan, which is a series of drills, but a practice plan that reflects your training goals. What do we want to achieve today? What's our priorities? What do we think is important today? And that has to be reflected in the practice plan. And then of course it has to be communicated to the players. These are the 3 things that we want to get done today, guys. These are the 3 things that we're really going to focus on, right? We want you to come on that journey. We want you to buy into what we're trying to achieve. So your plan needs to reflect your training goals. It needs to bring an element of confidence through organization, but just as importantly, it needs to be communicated. It needs to be dynamic. Right now, the days of doing a block of a drill for 10, 12 minutes are gone. You need to move quickly from drill to drill, from concept to concept. You need to weave in a whole lot of different things because players now have a huge ability to take in information. You know, with the internet, obviously smartphones, all these things, these young players have got far more ability to absorb information, seek more information, respond to that information than me at 52 ever will. So our practice plan and the way we structure our practice has to reflect that. So in youth setting, 6 to 8 minutes on a drill or a concept, then we need to move on. You know, for a long time, coaches would say, no, we're going to stay and get this right. We're going to stay on this drill, or we're going to stay on this fundamental till we get it right. Well, the reality is we know we're not going to get it right in one drill. We're not going to get it right in one practice. So, you know, moving on or adding a layer to the drill keeps it dynamic, it keeps it engaged, and it all works to that positive practice environment. We have a term in Australia, we talk about the importance of coaching on the run. And what we mean by that is not continually stopping drills to bring players in, provide some more instruction, they go back out to the drill, and we do that 20 or 30 times during practice. It's too stop-start. It's not how the game works. They need to understand how to problem solve and make adjustments on the fly. So we talk to our coaches about coaching on the run. So rather than stopping a whole drill to provide one player with some information or some instruction or some correction, try and get across that player's flight path and just give it to them rather than the drill stopping, right? Or try and get to an area where the players can hear you and feel you, but they still can keep working in the drill and bark out that information and give them some key points. I think too often we're so desperate to help, we're so desperate to provide information for these young players that we overcoach, right? Once practice starts, we have more control and ability to intervene than in a game. That doesn't mean we should. And what I mean by that is, it doesn't mean that we should, every time we see something that we want to correct or acknowledge or affirm, sometimes you have to be happy to see that something's working and let it keep working. And even if something's not working, make a note and address it at a time when they're shooting 3 throws or they're getting a drink or there's a break, a natural break in practice. We talk about the 3 L's of a good session. So we want less lines, right? We want less laps and we want less lectures. What we mean by that, we don't want players standing in a line waiting to get into their drill. We want to work out drills and breakdowns and practice activities that's got everyone moving. We want more basketballs, less lines. We want more doing, less standing. Less laps talks about, in Australia, we have a lot of football where if something goes wrong, the coach will send the players on a lap of the oval or 5 laps of the oval as a punishment. And in basketball, we might get them to do sprints. Well, what does that achieve? I'm not saying that we don't correct and that we don't discipline at times, but find different ways that actually help than sending them on laps or sprints. And less lectures speaks to coaching on the run. You know, try and avoid bringing the players in multiple times during the session to push out information, right? To lecture and to let them know what a smart coach you are. It's not about what a smart coach you are. It's about what sort of practitioner you are and can you keep practice moving. Games of purpose, we'll talk about that in a minute, but I did a clinic here last night in Wagga and we spoke a lot about whatever you do in practice, make it look like what happens in a basketball game. You know, we've all got drills and drills are great and we all share them, you know, on social media and we're always looking for the next great drill. But as you get older, you realize, well, this really doesn't pertain to basketball. This really doesn't look like anything that happens in a game. So have a look at your drills, the ones that you use a lot, and say, does it look like basketball? Does this look like or mirror something that may happen in the game? If it doesn't, try and add an element to make it that way. Celebrate the small successes, which just means, you know, if you're teaching a new skill or you've made an adjustment and one of the players executes it well, you don't have to stop practice and everyone stands around and gives a polite clap. But you've got to continually celebrate the small successes. And the bottom thing there is flight path feedback. We talk about coach individuals often, and we'll talk about a method for that in a minute. But that speaks to not stopping the whole drill, but just getting to individuals as much as you can, right? So, you know, they're moving from one drill to the other. You've liked what Larry Markkanen's done, so you get to Larry and say, hey, I really like that jump stop and that footwork, great job, right? Or you might say, hey, on that jump stop, make sure you pivot, lift your heel and make sure you pivot, but then walk off. Don't stay and then give him 4 minutes of instruction around one basic pivot move. So do it on the run, do it, get across his flight path, give the feedback, whether that's a positive affirmation or that's an intervention, and then move on to the next thing. Games of purpose, they're often referred to as small-sided games. I really like the term games of purpose. Because that's what it is. When you're doing a small-sided game in practice, there's a purpose to it. You know, you're wanting to drill or break down or rehearse a certain part of the game, whether it's the ability for the wing to feed the post and play 2-on-2 out of that, whether it's 2-on-2 pick and roll, 3-on-3 dribble handoff, you know, 2-on-2 +1 down screen drill, whatever it is, we're trying to do more in practice that simulates what happens in the game. In Australia, we've had a significant influence over a long time from the US collegiate system. Some of the great coaches, Pete Newell, Bob Knight, Mike Krzyzewski, Lute Olson. So we've got a somewhat of a collegiate way of coaching, where it's a lot of drills, and we move from drill to drill to drill to drill, and then play at the end. Well, as we develop as a coaching nation, and as we get more influences from all over the world, we understand that while those drills are certainly important and they have a role to play, we've got to do more that looks like a game. We've got to do more that gets the players ready for what they're going to experience, what they're going to face, what they're going to see in the game. And we've spent a lot of time trying to develop this area through small-sided games, or more recently, we've been referring to games of purpose. This is why we're doing this. This is why we're exposing this to you. So the players get a feel now that, okay, this is this part of the game. It's not a drill. It's not something in isolation. It's not something we're doing because coach saw it on the internet and he wants to do it. It actually feels like what's going to happen in a game. So how do you do that? We speak a lot about teach it, drill it, play it. And that's the progression on everything you do. So obviously you need to teach. It's not a case of we just roll the balls out, let kids play 3-on-3, 2-on-2 the whole session, don't correct them. We're not suggesting that for a minute. But we want to teach it, provide, I'm a big one on the power of 3. Right? Provide 3 key points of detail. Then drill it, make an environment where they can practice it, build some confidence, rehearse it, understand the movements, understand the spacing to it. But the key is getting to the last component, play it. Whether it's a shooting drill, whether it's a ball handling drill, passing drill, combination drill, make sure you go through that progression. Teach it with those 3 points of detail, drill it, so get them confident, and then let's play. And play doesn't mean 5-on-5 full court. Play means 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, right? But they have to be able to, in their mind, link the skill to what's going to happen in a game and what you want them to do and execute in the game. If you don't use that bridge to go from teach it to play it, they never get that. They get stuck here in drill it. Well, as you know, there's no drills in games. There's competitive environments, it's dynamic, there's a lot going on, there's referees. So you've got to make sure, again, that you practice what's going to happen in a game. And this is at under 12 level, right through to cadets, right through to, pro basketball. Use drill progressions rather than a series of drills. So, I'm sure you've heard the term layering. So, if you've got a great 2-on-1 advantage, disadvantage drill that you really like, well, rather than stopping that and then having another drill which is similar but it's not linked, just add an element. So you've got a 2-on-1 drill. Well, just add a second defender that comes in from a position of disadvantage. So it's still 2-on-1, but more like the game. Now it's 2-on-2. Now, can we attack the advantage? No, now it's 2-on-2. We've got a numbers game. What do we got? Pick and roll. We've got dribble handoff. We've got post feed. So try and work through, ideally, on 0 to competitive to an element that creates decision-making, and then a small-sided game or a game of purpose. So that's not 3 or 4 different drills. That's a natural progression that you can just continue to weave. You don't have to do a lot of stopping. You don't have to do a lot of lectures. You can just add those elements as you go. And all of a sudden, in your 10-minute training block on the 2-on-1, you've got 3 or 4 drills through it. And at the end of it, it looks like what might happen on the weekend in the game. And we spend a lot of time, drilling and playing in numerical advantage, disadvantage, because that's the game. So if I've got the ball, as soon as I beat my man off the dribble, Now we've got a situation of numerical advantage. The defense is at a disadvantage. So help comes, I kick it, there's a closeout, the next guy beats again. It's numerical advantage. That's the game constantly. And that's why we've got such huge respect for European basketball, the ability for really skilled players to beat their man and then make a good decision. And what, can I score? Can I draw another defender? Can I pass to an open shooter? Is that player shooting it or moving it to the next person? So if you want to develop heightened decision-making for young players, I would really encourage you to do it in that setting of numerical advantage, disadvantage, because that's what they're going to see in the game. If we're consistently playing with even numbers, that's not the game. Fast break, someone's got an advantage. Pick and roll, why do we do that? To create an advantage for the offense, right? Down screen, flare screen, why do we do that? To create a momentary 2-on-1, to create an advantage. So if that's the game, it makes sense, of course, that we weave that into our practice. So how can we be efficient in that setting? You know, again, this whole thing's about creating a positive learning environment in practice. Well, you need to be efficient and you need to have a system that allows you to be efficient. And as I've said a number of times, I'm a big advocate of the power of three. You know, have a three-step system to teach different things. So if you want to teach shooting, what's your 3 key points? We know that there's a lot more to go into shooting, but when you're under time constraints and you really want to narrow it down, what's your 3 key points for shooting? What's your 3 key points for pick and roll? What's your 3 key points for closeouts? What's your 3 key points for defensive rotations? And if you get that and you've got a really strong feel for that, that allows you to be a lot more efficient in how you go about it. So this is a teaching methodology, and I always credit Mike Dunlap, who is in the NBA now with Milwaukee and has been an NBA head coach and a highly successful college coach. And he's a great teacher, he's a great practitioner of learning. And he talks about praise, prompt, and lead. So what we want to do here is we want to always provide praise. We want to provide affirmation. Then we want to teach. We want to give them some information. And then I'll explain what I mean by leave. So, for example, if we're doing a drill working on a high post flash and catching the ball on a jump stop and then pivoting and hitting a back cutter for a layup, right? It might be 2-on-0, it might be 2-on-2. So I asked Hanno to flash to the elbow and come to a jump stop. Well, I've got to acknowledge and provide affirmation that he's done what I've asked, and I like it, and I did see it. So I might say, Hanno, I really love that. You had great balance. You were nice and strong on that jump stop. That's what we want. It gives us more options. So that's the praise element. Prompt, now I need to teach. I need to give him one little piece of detail that can make him get better right there and then. So I might say, Hanno, on that, you come to a jump stop, make sure you're pivoting so you can see the cutter, right? So you pivot, so you open up that passing angle and you're more effective. So that's one piece of detail that helps him. Now, the most important part in this methodology is leave. And I don't mean leave, walk off the court, go and get a can of Coke, you know, make a phone call. Of course not. But don't stay and reteach that. Don't stay and repeat that 4 times. So he's come to the elbow, he's come to a jump stop, we've acknowledged that, right? We're just trying to give him one more tool to pivot so he can see. We don't have to ask him, did he understand? Because it's a very, very simple instruction. We don't have to repeat it. And that's one of the things in coaching that we've got to try and limit or reduce. The amount of times we repeat the same instruction in the one conversation piece. I don't need to say to Hannah, do you understand? Do you know what I mean by pivot? Of course he understands. Of course he knows what I mean by pivot. So now I want to leave and go and coach someone else, coach another part of the game, rather than stay and all of a sudden we're spending 4 or 5 minutes on his ability to jump, stop and pivot. And by working through that power of 3, what you'll find is you'll be a far more efficient teacher. And the other thing, the players will like it because it will remind you to continually coach them individually. Remember we said at the start of the presentation, you want to coach individuals more often. Yes, it's a team sport and we understand that, we value that. But before it's a team sport, it's a group of people who like affirmation, who like to learn, who like to be acknowledged for the good things. And they actually do like to be corrected for things that they don't do very well. So that's a great little method that we try and use as much as we can. It keeps the coaches moving. It's interesting. We all have these now, sports watches that measure our heart rate, that measure our steps, and, all these things. Well, we talk to youth coaches, if they have one of these watches, to say, look, you should probably do about, 4,000 steps in that 2-hour session as a coach. And it's a great little tool to make sure that you're active, that you're playing your part in having a positive learning environment. If you look at your watch at the end and you've done 4,000 steps, there's a fair chance that you've got around as many players as you can. There's a fair chance that you haven't stood in one place. You've moved around so you can see what they can see. You can have that flight path communication. You're talking to your staff. That's a key part of it. Now, I'm not saying that you look at your watch and if you haven't done 4,000 steps, it's a disaster. But it's a great little tool and a little reminder. And if you've only done 2,000 steps, the only person that knows is you. But you might say, hey, next time I've got to make sure I'm a bit more active. I'm getting around to coaches more. I'm getting around to players more. I'm providing specific information and I'm using this praise, prompt, leave methodology. With coaching staffs getting bigger all the time, it's really important that we communicate effectively to one another. And again, it speaks to more conversations. We spend a lot of time talking to our coaches about the importance of conversation with players, the important conversation with staff, the important conversation with the trainers and the physiotherapists, just so we're constantly keeping each other in the loop and trying to be better. So these are some of the questions that we encourage coaching staffs to ask as they plan practice, as they're getting ready for the day's practice. So who are we going to be today as a staff? What are we about today? How are we going to work together to make this a positive learning environment? What's our language going to be? How's our approach? What's the first thing we're going to do when we get to the court? Are we going to engage players? Are we going to go and rebound for players if they're doing their shooting, Or are we going to go to the scorer's table, huddle together like we're a whole separate team and only go and engage players once the whistle goes for the start of practice? How are we going to communicate? How's our flight path communication? How have we been in previous practices to make sure that we're following what we want to achieve? Big one, how's our energy? We all know it, and I'm sure a number of you are the same. Most of our coaches in Australia are volunteers. So they work in a bank, or they're a teacher, or they're a builder, and then they race to the gym, get changed, jump on the floor. So sometimes it's hard to have energy. You've worked a 10-hour day and now you're on the floor with 10, 13, 14-year-olds. It's challenging. But if you've got a staff, you need to support each other and make sure that your energy is at the appropriate level. That doesn't mean you have to run around and jump into every drill, but what's the energy that you're trying to pass on to the young players? This is a big one. What is our learning priority, or what are our learning priorities for that session? I think sometimes we go into practice and you know, we say our priorities are this, and this. Well, everything can't be a priority in every session. Now, I'm not saying you spend the whole session doing team defense or pick and roll offense, but you have to have a real clear idea in your mind and as a staff about what do we really want to get out of today? What's the, you know, if we're only to achieve 3 things today, and again, the power of 3, what do we want them to be? And the last one, and this speaks to, you know, you've seen a lot, I'm sure, about the Golden State Warriors. How can we impact joy for the players today? How can we make it a positive learning environment? And joy when it comes to basketball doesn't mean everyone's giggling and laughing and smiling and no one's serious, but it speaks to that positive learning environment. What are we going to say? What are we going to do? What are our behaviors to make sure that we can impact joy for the players today? And then just as importantly, we want to plan, we want to execute, but then we want to review. It's just like a game. Practice is just like a game. So after practice, if you're lucky enough to have assistant coaches or staff, you know, think about some of these questions. Who were we as a staff today? If you remember the previous slide, who are we going to be today as a staff? Well, how did we go? Did we live up to our own expectations? Did we do what we said we were planning to do? Right? It's just a great, simple reflection. Did we create a positive learning environment? Or did we get into those old habits of yelling at players or punishing them by making them do sprints? And look, it happens. Just like players have bad games, bad practices, coaches have bad practices. So, you know, how were we in creating that environment? How was the efficiency of our language? You know, did we operate from the power of 3? Did we have a consistency of our language, our jargon, our terms, or did we just talk a lot? Right? And sometimes, guess what? The answer will be, yeah, you know what? We just talked a lot. Okay, well, the next practice we're going to be better. How is our energy? You know, that's going to be pretty evident because the player's energy is going to be reflective of the coaching staff's energy. And what can we do better next practice? All right, so really, there's 5 questions that you and your assistant coach or your staff can ask. That's only a 10-minute conversation as you pack down the gym and you put the balls away and you put the cones away and whatever it else is, and you're walking back to the office or you're walking to the car park. You know, those 5 questions I think are really good to make sure that you're living up to your own expectations to be a positive leader who's a teacher, who creates joy, who shares energy, and everything's a positive learning environment. Again, we're not talking about everyone's laughing, giggling, and it's not serious. This is important that we reflect on this and we try and become better practitioners. So that's, I guess, the formal part of it. In the presentation, that's a lot of me. So I'll stop sharing my screen. I think Hanno has the slides that he can share with you all. I've got my details there, both social media and email, and more than happy to share some information and ideas. But Hanno, I don't know if the coaches have got some questions that they might want to go through.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. That was a lot of great stuff, and certainly makes you kind of go over your today's practice or last week's practice. Did I show that energy that you just talked about? And and we got to be honest. We got to look in the mirror, and usually bad practice starts with us. So definitely gave me energy a lot more for tomorrow's morning practice. I'm going to be better tomorrow than today. But But yeah, so now if any of your listeners got questions, we got plenty of time here. Peter is just drinking his morning coffee, so so he's gonna be ready to answer your questions. Like we've done in the past, you can open up your camera as well and your microphones. So just you can shoot away with put on a chat, put some questions, and then we're gonna call your name. But before we get some questions there, you talked about Australian junior coaches and what is this current situation? The bigger clubs, do they start having more and more professional junior coaches, or is it still mainly voluntary coaches? Has there been a big difference in let's say in the last 10, 15 years?
Yeah, it's still predominantly volunteer coaches. I would say that 80% of total coaches in Australia would be volunteers. But to your point, it was probably 90+% just 10 years ago. So clubs are trying to find ways they're really valuing coaches now. They're trying to find ways to either employ them so they can do more and they can be rewarded for their skills and expertise, or at least give them something so it's not such a drain on the family and everyone around it. We're fortunate that we've got strong support from the government, providing basketball more money to employ more coaches, more development staff. And the other big progression here in Australia is the private schools. So the private high schools are employing full-time coaches, paying them a worthwhile salary, giving them great facilities and resources. So that's been great, because what that's allowed is people who might have been a volunteer for 20 years and done, coached our junior national team, coached various teams, done a great job in producing, but they've never been rewarded for it. Now they can go and work in that environment where they're a full-time coach, nice salary, nice conditions. So it is going that way. But like, for example, we had 43 coaches at our clinic last night here in a small town in New South Wales. 42 of them were volunteers. There was one paid coach at the clinic. So we still got a long way to go.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously the reality in a lot of places, and it always comes down to money. That's, and unfortunately. But also, before we get into the listener questions, what's your involvement, on every summer, or actually, I mean, your winter, on the junior national team programs? Do you visit the camps? Do you participate in kind of in the selections, or what's your role in your junior national team programs on a yearly basis?
Yeah, well, our international season's our winter, as you know, opposed to the Northern Hemisphere. We have all our junior national team camps at our Centre of Excellence, all of them, every age group. That's the home of basketball. That's the home of our national team program. So I'm there, I observe a lot of practice, have a lot of meetings with coaches to provide some feedback, play a bit of devil's advocate about selection, and then I chair all the selection meetings. Doesn't mean I pick the teams, because obviously the head coach has to be comfortable with that, but I'll chair all that, and I'll just ask the questions that you ask. Do you think you have enough shooting? Have you got a key defensive player that, if Larry Markkinen's, getting off, you've got someone can go and guard him, a big wing, those sort of things. And then when we go to the tournaments, I go to most of the tournaments as head of delegation, but it's really just to support the coaches, not to tell them to play this player or run this set, but just be a sounding board and a support for them. So it's pretty cool. It's getting to go to those events, and you don't have the pressure of trying to win a medal every single time. You're just there enjoying it and giving ideas.
All right. Well, Well, that's great. Yeah. So, all right, like I said, any of you have questions, just put a note on that chat, and then we let you ask it. First one is Tuukka Kavisto. You had a question. Go ahead. Okay, so Tuukka has no mic. Okay, so I'm going to ask his questions for him. All right. So Tuukka's asking, how do you manage this topic outside of practice with your players? Any specific things that you discuss in the beginning of the season, end of the season, etc.?
Yeah, it speaks to more conversations, and we talk about conversations, not meetings. You know, I'm sure most people on the call have played at some level, and you know, if the coach says, "Hey, we're going to have a meeting," I don't think any player in the history of basketball said, "Yeah, cool, let's have some meetings. We love meetings," you know. So we really try and make it a conversation, right down to if we're going to have a pre-season meeting, we'll make sure the chairs are in a circle, so there's no hierarchy. It's not the coach sitting out the front like the headmaster pushing out information. We'll really work hard to create a circle, so now everyone's the same hierarchy. Everyone's opinion is valued. Now, of course, the coach is the leader, right? But what that does is just give a bit more confidence that players are going to be heard and respected, rather than at the start of the season give them a big philosophy and tell them how you're going to do everything and for example, take them through this presentation. They're not interested in that. They're players, they're not coaches. So I would pick out, again, the power of three. This is how we're going to communicate and expect you to communicate. This is how we're going to prepare for practice and expect you to prepare for practice. And just 3 points, right? And then we'd open that up for discussion. But I think, you know, we spoke about less lines, less laps, less lectures. I think there could be another one, right? Less team meetings, you know, less dark rooms with people sitting there and having to listen. So that would be how we go about it. But also the assistant coaches spend a lot of time in conversation, you know, whether that's getting a coffee, whether that's driving a kid to study hall or whatever it is. Just have conversations, and over the course of the year, it really adds up.
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to the, you know, coaching on the fly. You know, you see a player walk into a class or come into practice early, you know, just go and ask a couple questions, talk, and you know, leave, go to the next. So
Yep.
So a lot more informal meetings and rather than sit downs, like you said.
Yep.
Okay, we got a KJ Sal has a question about stretching. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm a junior coach from Helsinki, and I would like to ask when and where players do stretching. Is it somehow organized, or do we just wish that the players do it? It's not basketball. Stretching is not basketball, but I guess necessary thing to happen.
Yeah, Coach, it's a fascinating one. I think we've gone full circle. You know, we would often have a trainer or even an assistant coach supervise the stretching at the start. Now we know that stretching pre-activity is not all that valuable. Yeah, it helps getting a bit warm, but it really post-activity stretching is more important, as sports science would indicate. But to answer your question, like in our women's program, they have a thing called Pro Time. And they put 15 minutes on the clock prior to the start of practice. And it's the player's responsibility to be a pro. And what they mean by that is, if you need to stretch. If you've got a tight back, get some treatment. If you need to get on the foam roller, right, and roll out soft tissue, that's what you do. You know your body, 15 minutes on the clock, we're going to stay away from you. but you need to get yourself ready to go. And the reason they like doing that, it puts it back on the players to get themselves ready. And they call it pro time because they think when they become a pro, that's what they'll need to do. They'll need to do more of their own physical preparation, stretching, prehabilitation, rehabilitation things. The boys are a little bit different because they found that, you know, we say, okay, guys, you got 12 minutes to stretch. Guys that sit around for 12 minutes talking and do one stretch. I'm sure you've all seen this one, you know, guys just doing, I don't even know what that is, a stretch, but so they do more structured environment now where they have someone supervise it. I'm a bit in between. I think you've got to develop some accountabilities, you know, and explain why it's important and explain things like firstly, injury prevention, you know, flexibility, all those things, but also longevity. You know, the players that commit to stretching consistently, pre-practice, post, they're the ones that play till they're 35. The guy that just, you know, sort of does a couple of shoulder shakes and runs out and plays, that's fine when you're 20. But that catches up pretty quickly. So briefly answer your question, you know, time on the clock, make sure you supervise, give them the tools, but post-practice stretching, recovery, ice, that's probably more important. So if one has to give, I would warm up with shooting and a lot of drills to get the blood flow going and just make sure that they're getting rid of that lactic acid at the back end of practice with some worthwhile stretching.
Yeah, that's a very, you know, that's a broad topic and ongoing, and obviously there's probably as many opinions as there's speakers. But I got before we get another listener question. I have a question about how does the Basketball Australia structure your coaching license and your coaching certificate program? You know, is it you know, regional at the lower level? Like for example, in Finland we have 1, 2, and 3 levels. You know, and then you know, then that's the highest we go here, and you need the highest level, you know, to coach at the top leagues here. How does Australia structure it, and do you see, you know, the improvements that you are hoping to get, you need to improve, or you think you guys have found a great way to do it, and then now you just need more and more coaches to participate?
Yeah, we have a 4-tier system, and the bottom tier is really just for the mum and dad that want to, you know, the kids playing at the rec center, and they just want to help them. You know, they don't want to be a basketball coach. They don't want to go to Eurobasket. They just want to be able to help their son or daughter and their 7 or 8 friends. And it's really, this is how you organize practice. Here's a couple of simple drills. And we talk about the fantastic 5 of that level: dribble, pass, pivot, shoot, guard your man. Dribble, pivot, pass, shoot, guard your man. If you can just get the kids to have a base understanding, you've done a great job. The next one is for the coaches that want to be a little bit more serious, and then it progresses. Our top, like you, our top accreditation, which is called performance coach, is for junior national team coaches, pro coaches, national team coaches, and it's more what we'd call the soft skills. It's more about the stuff we're talking about: leadership, group dynamic, all the things. By the time they get to that level, we think you know how to teach shooting, you know how to teach man-to-man defense, you know how to run a press, you know how to go out of bounds plays, blah, blah. It's more about, okay, can you be a leader, game coaching, strategy, tournament coaching. So the bottom 2 levels are done at the clubs and the regional level. And we provide the resources. And then we're a big country, so we've got states. So our state associations do the 3rd level, and then we do the 4th level. the top level. So those courses are run by us. So it's it works okay. It works okay, and we think that having that, but then the 40 clinics a year help. I'm a big believer that the courses by themselves, or the licenses, as you call them, don't necessarily get that people all that much better, right? It gives them some tools, but then you need to give them some more varied information.
Right. Good. Makes sense. Yeah. Teddy, you raise your hand. You have a question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hi, Peter. Thank you for your presentation. But just, I just want to, if you just want to share us your experience on assistant coach role in terms of designing practice, how they how do you divide the role in the practice, and perhaps also you can elaborate it in the game situation also. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's a great question, coaches. As coaching staffs grow, you look at the national team staffs and you look at the NBA, Eurobasket, I'm sure you're a pro league, there's endless assistant coaches. And I always think, what do all these guys do? And is there too much noise? If there's 5, 6 coaches, every coach wants to have their say, every coach wants to impact. And I'm thinking, after a while, it's just going to be too much noise for the players. So I think as a head coach, you need to lead the messaging. It doesn't mean everyone says the exact same thing, uses the exact same words, but this is our messaging. We want to be consistent because, as you know, if you've got 2 coaches sort of saying alternate things because they're not organized and they didn't communicate, the players, rightfully so, are going to be confused, right? So lots of conversation with your staff about this is how we, this is our messaging. This is going to be our messaging today. This is going to be our messaging tomorrow, next week. This is how we're going to communicate. And early as the head coach, you have to be pretty hard on that. Again, it's not telling coaches you must use this word or that term, but hey, that's not our message. That's not what we're about. We've got to make sure that we're all on the same page. In terms of practice, it really depends on what you like to do as a head coach. Do you like to take the bulk of practice, lead it, and then have the assistant coaches coach on the run? Or do you like to give assistant coaches parts of practice to run? I think the latter is more important. Your job as a head coach is not only to develop the players, but it's to develop the coaches. And having an assistant coach do nothing more than run the score clock or have a towel and wipe the floor or clap and cheer, it doesn't develop them. As we know, we're talking about the players. We want them to do more that looks like what happens in a game. Same with coaching. I want to make sure our assistant coaches have got, they feel part of practice, and that the players see that you respect them and that you trust them to lead things. How do you do that? I ask the assistant coach, what's your thing? So I might say to you, Teddy, what's your thing? What are you really comfortable at? And you might say, pick and roll offense. All right, tomorrow there's going to be a 10-minute window in practice and you're on pick and roll. You know our power of 3, our messaging, but you're in, right? So tomorrow we're just going to have pick and roll, coach such and such. Get to that, righto, you're up, coach, go. And give them that confidence. I think that's really important to do that. And in games, this is the hardest thing, I think, in games. 5 or 6 assistant coaches at the pro, what are they all doing other than just annoying the players? So you've got to give them who's taking statistics, who's on the offense, who's on the defense, who's on the offensive rebounding. Give them some clarity of what you need. So it's just not a whole lot of noise. You can't have, if you're a youth coach, you probably only got 1 assistant, but you still can't have 2 coaches constantly talking about every aspect of the game. It's confusing. So I think allocating key areas and plugging into what their strengths are really important.
Thank you. All right, Mikko, you have a question.
Hold on. Howdy. Thank you. This been good. It's always nice to hear from people from Australia and Turku. They're speaking, you know, a fun way. I had a question about different kind of players in the gym at the same time. They might be tall and short. They might be clumsy and athletic. They might be young and old, whatever. The world I'm living in is that I have 30 kids, 11 years old, and one of them has started today, and one of them played 7 years. And when you talk about praise, prompt, and leave, and this pre-coach and pre-practice and post-practice, how much you talk about what kind of a feedback to give to players? I mean, that player over there has played 1 day, that player has played 7 years, that's clumsy and big and so on. Do you focus on this kind of things with your staff and yourself?
Yeah, particularly if you're in an environment where you've got that, I call it big bandwidth, you know, from this to this. It's, you know, it's not like a pro game where the bandwidth is that big. You know, everyone can play, everyone. So yeah, I think you need to be more organized. And I think the great thing to do is write every player's name or initial down and have a plan. Now that can't be every practice, of course, especially if you've got 30, like in your situation. But just document, and what you end up doing is you just put a little, and I often do this in sessions. I have my practice session I've got, and I might only have 12 players, but I put 12 players' initials up the top. Every time I praise, prompt, and leave that with that player, I just put a tick. Just so I just, like while the drill's running, I go over to my practice plan on the side, I just put a tick. And then that at the end of practice, I look at it and go, okay, yeah, pretty good. I've got 2 or 3 ticks next to every player. Sometimes I go, oh, wow, I didn't coach Mikko at all. I didn't coach Hanno at all today in terms of give them something specific. So the next practice, I make sure, hey, it doesn't mean I run over there and say, hey, okay, Teema, I'm going to coach you now because I wanted you to be better. But you're just more aware of who you've given instruction to, who you've given some affirmation to. And I think you just need to make your staff aware that you have got a big bandwidth, all right? And be specific and say, hey, Larry's coming to practice. It's only his second practice. He's sort of been playing rec ball and he doesn't really know what he's doing, but we think he's a good athlete, really good kid, you know, but bit of an introvert. So let's just make sure we're aware of that with our communication. That's it. You don't have to do any more. You don't have to psychoanalyze him as a person, but just make sure everyone's on the same page about that. And the last thing I would say is some people will need more coaching than others, but that doesn't always mean that the players down here need more coaching. Sometimes we think, oh, we've got to coach them up. We've got to bring them up here. Well, sometimes that intimidates them. You know, if they're only 11 years old and, you know, say they're 11 years old and they're 5'11", 6 foot, it hurts to walk. They're trying to figure out how to just, you know, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, jump stop, you got to pivot on that. And you think you're doing this great job. And they're going, oh my God, leave me alone. Why are you picking on me? Why are you only coaching me? So striking that balance is really important. And I'll send Hanno an article on this about how you manage that bandwidth, how you make sure that you balance your communication. It's from, I don't know if you've seen Australian rules football. It's our football code here. And they have a squad of 42. So it's big. It's really hard. So they've got these systems and how they make sure that they coach the best player that's making $900,000 a year, and they coach the 17-year-old rookie. So it's some good stuff. So I'll send that later on the day to Hanno. He can share it with you. Hope that sort of helps a little bit.
That's very good. Thank you.
All right, good. And you kind of answered. Tuukka had a kind of follow-up question on that. You know, that what are the times that you don't follow your you know, praise, teach, and leave? You know, if there's a you know, a player that needs more attention, you know, is there times that you yourself, or you just a coach, don't follow that leave principle, or stay with the coach? I mean, the coaches stay with that one player for a longer time in a practice. You know, is there anything, you know, kind of follow up on that, or you kind of did hit on that, but you know, then obviously, you know, there's time for individual sessions. You know, if you have one or two players and one coach, that obviously gives more attention. But is there a time that you would give one player more attention in practice and kind of keep teaching him, you know, certain things, you know, on a team practice?
Yeah, of course. And, you know, all this stuff, it looks great in theory, doesn't it? All this stuff, it's a nice, fancy presentation, and I sound like I'm this genius, but the next practice I have, I'll yell at a player, or I'll stay at them too long. So the short answer is yes. And some players need that. Some players need you to stay with them on the journey. What I mean by that is, rather than leave, and I can see Coach's question here in the chat, rather than leave, stay with them and walk them through and help them through. And they feel that sense of comfort by you being still with them, still being near them, still talking. So that just comes down to feel. All these things, you know, if we got everything right all the time, we'd win every game, but we don't. It's all feel and it's all personality. The other thing that I think you can do that is really important is pre-practice. You know, you have a practice, usually players are there early, and you should be there early as a coach if you can be. And when they're there early, what are they doing? Well, I know what they're not doing. Defensive slides, passing, you know, they're shooting threes, they're shooting step backs, they're shooting half-court shots, and that's cool. But, you know, maybe just grab that player that you know needs a bit more affirmation and just say, hey, Hanno, mate, just 5 minutes before practice, let's come down and work on one thing. Let's come down and work on that move off the reverse pivot, right? And don't do a lot of coaching, but give them a lot of you, right? You're not there trying to define every single thing, but it's a physical affirmation that you care for them, that you really want them to get better. So it might literally be 3 or 4 minutes. They might take 8 shots, but you can give them that affirmation. Then in practice, when they execute that one time, that's when we celebrate the small. We say, hey, Hanno, that's what we did before. Yes, man, rolling, right? So there's different ways you can do it, but I think we waste a lot of pre-practice. We stand talking to our assistant coaches. What about? We just had a meeting. We spend half the time together. Now, 5 minutes before practice, we're standing in a huddle talking. Who should we be talking to? The answer is always the same, the players. So, but yeah, I'm not suggesting that this is a perfect strategy. It's just a strategy.
It makes a lot of sense, yeah, it's about those small successes, and when you see a player picking up something that you maybe just talked or talked last night, and then you can see he or she tries it, and even if she fails it, it's still that she or he has that courage to try it. That's something that you work. Maybe you got 8 repetitions that, you know, right before practice. Those are kind of the cool moments of being a coach, because then you know, hey, maybe in a week he or she is going to try it in a game, and that's so. But you know, I you know, unless, you know, any of the listeners got questions, I would love to sit here for 2 hours and pick your brain. But it's been awesome. I certainly got a bunch of notes here that I'm going to go over tomorrow, with the other coaches and see how we can get better. Like you said, I will share your presentation to this group, and I know you're so open to share the game. So if the coaches have questions, they can contact you or get to you through me, and if you send me that article, I'll be allowed to share that as well. But on my own behalf and rest of Basketball Finland, we really appreciate, Peter, you getting up early and sharing your time and sharing your knowledge. Hopefully we can do this again, maybe next season when we all a little bit better, and then maybe you got some more ideas and you already shoot down some of your old ideas. That's the fun of it. So thank you again, Peter, and hope you have a great start of a summer there. All right.
Thanks, Hanno. Huge respect for you and all of Finland basketball. I love sharing information. Thanks for the coaches for being willing to jump on and listen to a crazy Australian. I appreciate it. So everyone have a great night and all the best for your season as you get rolling. So thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you, Peter. Ja nyt kiitoksia tosiaan kaikille taas, jotka ovat olleet mukana. Ja tähän saadaan vielä screenille sitten informaatio ne, jotka teistä on päivittämässä lisenssiä, niin löytyy nämä yksinkertaiset ohjeet, ja jos laitatte Jussi Räikälle sitten tässä näin. Ja tosiaan,
Kerro Hanno vielä siitä päivittämisestä, mikä se oli se Jussin ohje siihen? Oliko se yhdestä vai useammasta?
3. Tässä on, jos seuraa 4 Koutsikorneria, niin meillä on tässä on meillä neljäs kolme 4 vielä tässä tulee, niin tässä lukee, että kirjaa havaintosi 3 eri näkökulmasta: uudistavaa, vahvistavaa ja reflektoitavaa. Kun olet seurannut 4 Koutsikornerin webinaaria, lähetä oppimisraporttisi sähköpostilla osoitteeseen jussi.raikka@basket.fi. Ja me ollaan tästä puhuttu alun perin ainakin 6 Koutsikornerista, ja tällä haavaa varmasti jatkuu vielä, mutta tähän lisenssipäivitykseen niin pari on tulossa vielä, ja tässä Lassi Tuovi oli tosiaan lupautunut, mutta tuossa tuli korona ja muut tuossa loppukesällä vähän sotkia asioita, niin laitetaan tässä näin koitetaan löytää oikeat tavat, että jos ei saada 6 suoritettua ennen joulua, niin kuin siinä oli alun perin, niin ne tulee sitten alkuvuoden aikana, mutta niin sovitaan, että saadaan kyllä sitten nämä lisästi päivitettyä, mutta nämä löytyy, nämä edelliset Koutsikornerit löytyy sieltä Urhean sivuilta, niin sieltä, jos olette missannut edelliset, niin voitte katsoa ne. Mutta hyvä, niin mun puolesta oikein paljon kiitoksia ja hyvää yötä kaikille coacheille, ja ollaan, jos mitään kysyttävää, niin voitte laittaa mulle sähköpostia hanno@basket.fi, ja jos on kiinnostunut, niin esimerkiksi meidän harjoitukset tuolla urheiluhallisessa HB-harjoitukset ovat avoimia kaikille, niin olkaa vain yhteyksissä, jos et halukkaita tulla katsomaan, ja kuinka hyvin me pystytään olla energisiä ja coachaamaan pelaajia, ja mielellään opitaan kaikilta muilta valmentajilta ja jaetaan tietoutta, ja sillä tavalla meidän suomalainen koripallo menee eteenpäin. Mut kiitoksia paljon, ja toivottavasti tässä jo lähiaikoina saadaan seuraava Koutsikornerin vieras tänne lauteelle. Kiitos.
Kiitos, Hanno.
Kiitos, Mama.